Good evening, good evening, good evening, and happy Friday to everybody as we welcome you to another fantastic episode of the Empowering and of the Hearts of Men podcast, hosted by the Empowering Perspective community. We are your hosts for this evening's conversation. I am Dwayne Dwyer, otherwise known as the Mindset Coach. To my left is my brother from another mother across the table with Mr. Christopher McClellan. In other words, he's just an ordinary guy. To my right, you will find the Uncle Junior himself, Mr. BuildYourCreed.com, Garfield Martin. Below us, these two distinguished gentlemen, starting first to our left, is Mr. Roland Down the Street, also known as a poor man's Dr. Phil, Mr. Man, I forgot your name. Um, Roland Walker. And to his right, he started doing the finger thing, man. And to his right, you have the son of Timothy, the available man himself, Mr. Tawami Gaddy. Gentlemen, how are you on this fine Friday evening?
I am well. I am well.
I'm doing well and glad it's Friday.
Man, it is always good to be Friday. Gentlemen below, how are you?
I'm good. As you know, I've been running and ripping and looking forward to having this conversation.
Yeah, I'm doing well as well. Just ready to get into this one.
Man, I'm gonna need that brother to get his energy up just a little bit, man. Didn't he sound tired?
He sounded like he was about to sing "It Is Well for My Soul" or something. Go
Oh
ahead.
my goodness.
when,
You know
when
he did.
peace.
He did say he is a songster himself.
Yeah.
Listen, if this is your first time joining us again, we want to welcome you and thank you for being a part of this community and this conversation. So again, if this is your first time, look in the bottom right hand of your screen, you will see an icon. Go ahead and click on that and hit the subscribe button and join us. And go ahead and hit the notification bell so you'll know every time that we go live. Just a reminder, we are here every Friday night at 8 p.m. Also want to give a special shout out to all of our followers, man. We greatly appreciate you guys, and especially the hottest chat on YouTube, man. We greatly appreciate you guys. Michelle Ray, Bernadette Simmons, Miss Charlotte Jordan, as always, great to see you. Queen V, Verlene McCoy, great to see you as well. Good to see you, MJ. As always, welcome to this evening show. And anybody else who's out there who just haven't had the opportunity to speak yet, just go ahead and speak. Let us know you're here so we can acknowledge you. And last but not least, make sure that you add value in the chat. We love the comments that you put, and we always try to make sure that we bring them to the conversation. Last but not least, I want to give a special shout out to our super supporters. We greatly appreciate you. The little first sergeant that could. How you doing, Marie Boy? Good to see you. Um, I want to give a special shout out to our super supporters. We greatly appreciate you. As you notice, I might be wearing some empowering perspective community swag. These gentlemen will get theirs to sometime this week, and that is the gift that I am going to send to all of our super supporters. So again, if you want to be a super supporter, look at the bottom of your screen on YouTube, and you'll see how to become a part. Now, you'll find that this is a continuation from last week because last week all we talked about was listening. Because, in my opinion, that's probably the most important and underrated part of communication. So, if you missed last week's discussion, go back and take a look at it because we talked about different types of listening and how to actually employ them. But this week we're going to talk about talking. And I'm gonna tell you the truth, man. The problem is, and I think John Maxwell said it best himself. The biggest misconception about communication is assuming that it actually happened. So sometimes, right, we get to the point to where we talk. Good to see you, Lisa Keys. Welcome to the show. I think I probably missed you. You was on your other name. Um, Again, one of the biggest problems is that we can, express how we feel verbally, but it just doesn't come out right. It's not received the way that we intended for it to be received. And what we'll find is that the lack of effective communication between two people, two partners, whatever, can actually cause a rift when it comes down to that relationship. So, with that being said, we're going to kickstart this thing off, and we're going to start off first and foremost. We're going to start off by addressing a particular concern, and this is pretty much not personalizing another person's concerns. Now, don't want to insult anybody's intelligence out there. But again, it's just like, let's just say I was talking to my brother Roland and I was sharing some things that happened with me today because I was, a little upset, a little disappointed, probably in my feelings as well. And then Roland responds back and shares with me his experience, similar experience to what I was going through. So what he just did is he took my experience and made it his. And now I could get to the point to where I didn't feel like I'm heard, or he missed the whole context of the conversation, or he literally made my conversation about him. So when we personalize other people's experience, that can be a detriment. And just real quick, when communicating in relationships, people who are good at it avoid personalizing their partner's actions. Instead, they focus on the situation and how things can be restored. With that being said, gentlemen, as a quick reflection, what did or does it look like when you or someone else personalize another person's concerns?
I'll start because this is something that I'm constantly working on. This is me. This is one of the things in my wheelhouse that I struggle with. I have gotten better over the last couple of years because um I've taken an interest in looking at how I communicate with someone. So for me, like this is something that I do. So what it looks like is this: when you're on when you're on the receiving end of this, well, actually, when you're on the receiving end of this, it can look like the person is disinterested or that what you have to say is unimportant. And what can continue to happen is that eventually, if you keep having these types of conversations, the person won't ever feel validated, and eventually the relationship could suffer from it. So that's my 2 cents to start this conversation. Like I said, I'm still working on it. It's a constant thing, and I have to constantly self-reflect, go back through conversations that I've had with people throughout the day or even after it, and say, how was the conversation? Was the other person more important, or were you more important in the conversation?
I think for us that grew up in the 70s and 80s and early 90s, we may not think so, but we do it a lot where we will say, we grew up like this. So whenever someone tells us something, we minimize how they feel. We already determined that they're soft and they can't take anything. And we say, when I grew up or when I had this experience, I did this or we did it like that. And so all you got to do is this, minimizing everything that person said and made it into a snapshot of, I got it right. All you got to do is do it like we did it, and you'll be okay.
The only time I've ever done this is when the situation is something that I have direct experience in. I never try to, I always let the other person map out their concerns. I never try to make their concerns about me because I didn't go through it. And evidently, you're talking to me because you want me to help you through this. So let me just sit here and listen and hear what you got to say. Then once I'm done hearing what you got to say, I'm going to ask you, okay, did you just want to vent or do you want to solve this? Like case in point, I was at the barbershop today, and my barber we've literally grown up together. So he's seen what I've gone through. I've seen what he's gone through. And I saw him going down the same path that my father went down and that my half brother went down, as far as like the alcohol and how it consumes you, and the having fun and how it consumes you. And I looked him dead in the face and I said, you saw what my dad went through. You saw what my half brother went through. You have a whole business with employees that's under you. Plus, you have children. Stop it. You understand what I'm saying? That's the only time that I would do that because I have direct experience in what he's going through. But if you coming to me with something random, I'm going to just sit and listen. I'm not going to try to give you a result unless you ask for one. And don't get mad when the result that I give you ain't what you asking for. That's just me.
Oh man, I think I look at two different aspects of it, right? Because I used to be when I was younger, and I know people who used to be or still are the people we used to call the one-uppers. Got to have a story for a story. Got to have, you went through, you telling me something traumatic. I got to have something more traumatic.
Make them feel worse for you than they do for themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We used to be a song in the early 2000s. I don't know if many people remember it, but it used to call Mr. Me Too. It was like, yeah, you too. I know.
The
Yeah,
clips.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The clips of
So
Pharrell. Yeah.
yeah, and that's what I think about. But then on the flip side of it, I start thinking about myself when I was younger as well. And I'm still learning how to communicate, right, in all aspects of my life. But when you really don't know or haven't been taught about proper communication, but you're still trying to be relatable to what someone's going through, it can become easy to say, well, I went through something similar, because what you're trying to do is let them see, I can relate to you. So I'm there for you. So when I respond, you understand I'm responding from a position of similar experience. So, and someone put in there, you got to be conscious of the perception that the other person will see, because it does come across as if, oh, you're not really concerned with what I'm going through, because now you're just trying to deflect on you. Oh no.
Yeah, we got you. We got you. No, I'm glad you brought up the one upper, right? Because I think you're absolutely correct, and that was the direction I was going to go. But since you stole that from me, I'm gonna go a different direction, right? And I think the direction I'm gonna go, I think everybody can relate to this. I don't know of anybody who is exempt. We could be in a heated discussion, right? And I didn't want to go with the heated discussion first, but fine, we could be in a heated discussion and I am sharing with you how I feel. And then you turn around and take that from me and then remind me of something I did like 7, 10 days ago. Right. So you really didn't hear what it was I was saying. What you did is you just kind of flatlined everything by trying to remind me of something that you failed to discuss a few days ago. But so now the only reason you're bringing it up is because we're in a discussion. And so when we do that and we personalize those things, again, it robs the other person of the conversation. Like Roland said, it minimizes their feelings in the midst of that. And it really invalidates who that person is in their position in the entire situation, relationship, or whatever you may have it. And so I'm glad you actually brought that to the table as well. Any other points? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Can I ask a question? Because you
Sure.
brought that up.
I did.
Is that scenario, would that be a personalization of another person's concern, or would that be a deflection of accountability?
It's one and the same in that particular scenario.
Okay.
They're deflecting by using, by robbing you of the experience, what you're going through, what you experience in that scenario, and trying to make it about them doing that conversation as well.
Trying to
Um,
make what you did worse than what you're telling them that they did. Is that really
Correct.
what it is? Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Or the equivalent.
I'm learning too, so I'm just clarification.
Yeah, they make it the equivalent to make it like, oh, it's a wash. You did this, I did that, we even.
Right.
Okay. All right.
And,
See,
and
now I can put what it is to what I see, because I've seen that kind of behavior, but now I can tell which one it is. I can tell if it's a deflection of accountability or if it's just trying to make me feel bad for telling you did something wrong because you offended by what I told you, instead of just taking the fact that I'm talking about the behavior and not you into consideration.
absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Spot on, sir. Spot on. Listen, I missed a few people in the chat, and I do apologize for that. Stephanie Henderson, welcome to this evening's conversation. My brother Eugene Wilson, welcome. Hey, listen, I'm okay with you being on LinkedIn, but the experience is always on YouTube. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Let's see. Lisa Keys says that it may appear that the person is self-focused and not care about your concern. I definitely agree with that. Absolutely.
But see, I don't know. And maybe this is me being naive, but sometimes somebody can bring up a similar scenario that they went through in their life. So that way you can have some sort of a semblance of a blueprint to figure some things out yourself. You understand what I'm saying? So maybe this is just the naive utopian side of me and me thinking the best of people. But I sometimes look at it as that too. Because like I said, I always listen to people like they have something that they could possibly teach me.
I think in that situation, that scenario, you would be able to tell by the conversation and how it's targeted
Right.
whether that person is trying to help you or saying get over it like I did.
Right. Okay. 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 Cool.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. All right.
All right.
I
Let
think
me
it comes down to intent too. You know, as is the person's story or the one up, is that to belittle you? Are they trying to get a point across? What is the intent behind the reason why they're trying to do it? Is it really a story to try to help you solve your problem, or is it a story to try to make themselves look good? So and then I think it's the amount of it too. You know, if you have a relationship with somebody, if they're every time you have a conversation, this is what they're doing, and that's a little bit different than we talk 5 or 6 times, and maybe once I bring up a scenario and I relate something that we're talking about to an experience that I've had. So I think that has something to do with it too, because like Roland said, we do it, on a regular basis sometimes, and I think a lot of times when I do it, the intent is to help and support. But however, I think it can sometimes overshadow their point of view or what they're trying to relate to me. So, like I said, I've had to sit back, adjust, look at myself, and see how I can get better and be a more effective communicator. Like Coach said, we all can get better at communicating.
absolutely, and I think it's those things. I say this all the time. Like we tend to overvalue our experiences. Like my experience is for me and me alone. I was supposed to learn from my experience. From that point on, I only use my experience for either a testimony going forward to help somebody understand that they can overcome as well, or I use it as a bridge for somebody else. That's it. But I should never use it as a resume starter or a one, yeah, beat my chest, or a one upper, or to make you feel inferior in the midst of in the midst of a conversation, because I have the experience that you have. Therefore, what you're saying doesn't really, it's not that important. So we got to be
So,
careful.
so is it a matter of placement, or so what does it look like when it's like, how do I add my experience without it looking like one upper, or making it look like, you know,
But
the I'm deflecting.
first of all, you have to ask, do you need to add your
I
experience?
was about to go there. Yeah, sometimes you just got to ask the question, hey, do you want me to talk about this or do you just want me to listen?
Yeah. And why are you wanting to add your experience?
See, I think by our very natures as men, we want to fix problems.
Yeah, we automatically go into problem solve mode
Right.
automatically because that's just
So
how we're built.
so we're wired not to necessarily listen to everything. So we hear something and we jump on it instead of listening. And I'm talking from experience. This is me, where I'm like, okay, you tell me a little bit, I'm already trying to fix that. I didn't listen to the whole thing. And sometimes if you just sit back and listen, you allow them to work it out themselves instead of you incorporating your ways, your values, your conditions, and everything, and saying, do it like this. So I think listening from last week helps out with this. Definitely.
Very good, sir. I like the way you did that. Well played. I want to add to that as
Yeah,
well
yeah.
because my brother called me earlier today, Chris. Chris called me today, and I listened to what he had to say. And I didn't add any experience to after I listened to everything he said. But me adding the experience wasn't for me to tell him what to do. It was to give him more things to think about as he makes the decision on what he needs to do. So it wasn't that I was adding the experience to minimize, what we were talking about. It was just adding the experience so he can have more context behind the decision that he needs to make. So if your experience isn't adding value to the other person, then we really need to consider, do I really need to add my experience at this particular point in time? Or do I just need to listen? Are they venting? Am I just listening to be a sounding board? Or do they want me to respond? And then when I respond, I need to be careful what that looks like. And I think
But
that,
see, the thing is though, the way that conversation went, I asked you for something and you
hmm
gave it to me.
hmm
It wasn't that I didn't say I needed to talk. I said I needed to talk, but I didn't say I need you to listen. I said I
right,
needed to talk.
right,
You understand what I'm saying? So I was
right.
open to whatever you had.
Yeah.
And and I think that's the disconnect. But like Roland said, we as men, we automatically go in problem solve mode when we hear concerns because we want to fix stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. So Michelle Ray says defensive posture and blame is what happens when a person doesn't like the conversation or the conversation isn't going their way. And I think she is spot on with that. Thank you for that. Lisa,
She transitioning for us, but go ahead.
she is. Lisa Keys said a pattern of behavior should be taken into consideration. Absolutely. Patterns tell a whole lot of story. This is the hardest working woman I know, by the way. Stephanie Henderson, Texan, by the way. Human human energy. Some people just try to relate to you by sometimes bringing up similar situations, but intensify their event just to try and relate. Absolutely, absolutely. I think a lot of times we do
So
that.
it's a I know what you're going through kind of thing, and not a what I went through is worse. So you need to get over what you're going through right now.
It can be, but I think what Uncle Junior said is the key. He said it's based upon the person's intent, and you can detect intent through the art of conversation. Like once we fine tune our ears, going back to Roland's segue from last week, once we fine tune our ears to listen actively and empathetically, then we can hear the intent behind the words that the person is actually expressing. Let me see. I think we got them all. So thank you guys for the value that you're adding in the chat. And again, we greatly appreciate you. Continue to add. And we're going to go forward and continue. Oh, yeah. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. I appreciate you guys for doing so. So as we continue to develop from this point here, we're going to talk about what I like to call the four postures of communication. I just combined two words together. Don't worry about it. The four postures of communication, right? And so, first and foremost, I think we all know oh so well, and it is an aggressive posture. And with that being said, an aggressive style, it is a style in which the individual expresses their feelings and opinions and advocate for their needs in a way that violates the rights of others. Thus, aggressive communicators are verbally and or physically abusive. Aggressive communicators will often try to dominate others, use humiliation to control others, criticize, blame, or attack others, be very impulsive, have low frustration tolerance, speak in a loud, demanding, and overbearing voice, act threatening and rudely, not listen well, interrupt frequently, use you statements, and have an overbearing or intimidating physical posture. That being said, gentlemen, what are the impacts of an aggressive communication posture as it pertains to relationships?
Somebody get knocked out. Let's just bottom line this. You not a, the loudest you will ever hear me is when we were talking about when parents deserve honor. And I was getting my point across when I was talking to Roland. And Roland actually gave me the grace to listen to me. That's about as loud as I'm gonna go. I'm not yelling and screaming, but I'm not gonna let you yell and scream at me. That's not about to happen. No. Now, if we're talking the male female dynamic, I'm leaving. But if we're talking the male male dynamic, hey, I'm gonna need you to calm down, or we can step outside and not ruin these people good time, and we can settle this like men. You're not about to talk to me like you crazy. That's the thing and that's the major difference between communication between men and communication between men and women. With men, there's a possibility that we could fight. There's a low level possibility that you might say the wrong thing the wrong way or the right thing the wrong way, and you might get your teeth knocked out. But when it's man to woman, it's different. You understand what I'm saying? I can't put my hands on you because one, I'll go to jail, and two, if I really put my all around it, you won't get up. So I gotta go. You understand what I'm saying? So I think that's what it is.
I got an example because when I was in the military and there was a person, he wouldn't get loud, but he would make sure that he would use cerebral conversation and demean people who were to get his point across in a way to call them buttholes or whatever in a smart way without saying it, where
Oh, so he was an articulate asshole. I've been called that.
And he would make sure they knew it. But it was like he said it so smooth, like, and it was so calm and smooth, and it put them in their places. But sometimes what you can do to that person when they figure it out, like, man, he just insulted me, it can cause a rift in the relationship, because then later on they understand he just called me an a-hole, or he just said I was dumb, and he proved it by me not even knowing what those words meant.
I smile because it's true.
Yeah.
You know, another thing that may happen if we're talking about relationships as a whole, the other person might not want to talk to you no more. What do I need to talk to you for if all you're gonna do is get mad? I'm just gonna shut up. And then you're gonna get mad that I'm not talking to you. And then it's gonna be a whole nother argument. I don't have to, I'm not raising my blood pressure because you mad. Get out my face. I'm sorry.
I think one of the things that impacts aggressive communication, one of the impacts can be the where my notes at? Oh, the message being lost. You're trying to have a conversation with somebody and you're standing over in an aggressive posture, you know, like I was about to say mom, like Charlotte Jordan said, in
We know
in the
that's your mother.
chat,
That's okay.
it can cause people to shut down, you know, and if they shut down, then the conversation could be over. The message may not get across to the other person. So what you're trying to do is communicate with the person, but communication is pretty much the exchange of information back and forth between, you know, whatever different parties, two people or whoever. So if your message is not being delivered, you're not being effective with your communication, which in return, the whole message can be lost. So you're saying this, you're having this posture, and none of your message or information is getting through to the other person because they could feel offended, they could feel afraid, they could feel insecure. All these different feelings can come along from that when you are talking to someone or having a conversation or communicate with someone with a very aggressive posture. Um, I remember just being a little private in the army, and Sergeant Major just walk around with he just stand around with his hands folded and stuff. And I don't know if it was aggressive, but I kind of picked up a little bit of that, you know, when I started making rank a little bit. But you know, I'm not necessarily saying that there was an aggressive posture, but you know, when I was younger, I always respected that posture. I didn't feel any type of way about it. However, that posture did make a lot of dudes kind of shaking their boots. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah, let's just call it a spade. Let's call a spade a spade. Like
Yeah.
I was taught that. Like the same thing
Yeah.
that Roland just described, that's what I learned coming up through the ranks in the army. So I got very good at putting words together. I didn't like there were times where I could yell. Don't get me wrong. And when I yelled, I mean I would it would be interesting. I just leave it at that. But I got to the point to where I learned to articulate what it is I wanted, how I wanted it done, whatever. And in such a degree, I would articulate it to where, and I think I said this before, to where a person may not have felt good about themselves. So that's one of the impacts, right? You could be so intimidating to a person that they walk away from the conversation and not feel good about themselves. Now, I also want to make sure that I'm clear when I say this, it is intentional. I want to go back to Uncle Junior word. It is an intentional insult. It is an intentional means of like making the person understand or feel that you must do what it is I say, how I say to do it, when I say to do it. It is an intimidation tactic that you use so that you can get your way from whatever situation or whatever scenario. And so when you go back to the military frame of mind, that's what we learned coming up. So as we start pinning chevrons on our chest and things of that nature, we started talking to people with the knife hand. Why? Because the knife hand was a part of that aggressive posture. We started, we started bowing up. Like it was like we had this thing we used to call close the gap. So if for whatever reason I sensed a degree of disrespect coming from a private or whatever, I would literally get close. It's like Roland did. I would get close to him, right? That is an intimidation tactic. That is what we call aggressive communication. That also happens in relationships as well, believe it or not. Now, I've never seen that physically with my own eyes, but I've never, I mean, it does happen to where a man and a woman in the midst of a heated conversation, they would get close and get in each other's face. That's not good because that is a form of aggression. And a form of aggression will put you in the mode of what we tend to call fight or flight. I'm going to say it again. A form of aggression will put you in the mode of fight or flight. And the issue with fight or flight is that you got to pick one. If you choose fight, then you're going to bow back. If you choose flight, you're going to shut down, like Ms. Jordan stated. So I think that's one of the things we got to look at as well.
I think when we look at this, and I saw some people put it in the chat while I was writing it down, but I'm a flip it though, because as you started talking about the military, I think that there are situations that turns, like literally turns aggressive into an assertive. And what I mean by that is in the situation to where I'm Sergeant, you're Joe, and Joe believes he has rights and Sergeant's platoon or squad. Sometimes that aggressive posture lets that soldier know that we have now created a dynamic that you forgot about, which was NCO subordinate. And so I think when it's used in that manner, it becomes assertive, even though I also agree that that assertive can be mistaken for aggressive. I think we have to understand that there are moments where you have to create that line, because you go to a new section, you artillery, you go to a new section, and they like the way the old chief used to do it, and they go to you and they say, well, chief, I don't like the way I think we should do it like this. You're gonna go, well, let's talk about it and have a no, hold on, wait, let's get this straight. I know who used to be your chief, but I'm your chief, and this is how my section gonna run. Because I heard you had like the second fastest gun. I don't know, but I'm just throwing shots.
Wow. That just happened.
Nah.
Yeah, that was good. Chris, you had anything, sir? I didn't want to leave you out. I know you talking about fighting people earlier, but
Oh no, I'm just saying, like with no, I'm just saying, like with us, you can't really. There's a certain decorum that we have to have when we talk to each other. If it goes above that, then there's, like I said, there's a possibility that somebody's gonna get punched. But that's just us.
gotcha.
Here's yes and no. I used to be around a lot of people, a lot of guys in my circle, my old wolf pack and stuff. That's how we talk. That was always the case. Eventually, it's going to come to a place where we're going to start throwing blows. Now, for the most part, I don't hang around those people. So, like, I don't worry about conflict with coach and you guys and different things like that. I don't worry about being disrespected. So, yes, what you said is valid. I also think what is valid is that when you start moving and when you start elevating yourself, those people that that's going to be their reaction to stuff won't be in your life long. Like, I'm not worried about if me, coach, and Roland go out. I ain't worried about one of them saying something slick to the waiter or something like that, or to some dude in the club, and then we're gonna have to box. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not worried about that. I don't hang around dudes and hotheads and stuff like that no more. Not no more. But at the same time, if something go down, we gonna get it on.
See, that's what I'm saying. Like, if something go down,
Bruh.
then it just goes down.
If it goes
But
down,
we're
if
not-
it get to that point, we going down.
Right, but we're not aiming for that though.
No,
We ain't aiming for
Listen,
it.
man,
I'm trying to avoid it.
know. Like, right, I don't know anybody that actually goes out to pick a fight.
absolutely. Because
You understand what I'm saying?
the way my disability is set up, we're gonna negotiate. Listen, listen, I want to make sure I'm giving honor to everybody in the chat. Again, welcome to this evening's conversation. Cassandra McKenzie, welcome. She actually said, she shut down in the face of aggressive communication. In other words, she stonewall. And that is a tactic. And one thing I will add, in on the flip side of aggressive communication, stonewalling is equally as bad. Not calling you out, Cassandra. I mean, I think we had that conversation before. So stonewall is part of the four horsemen to the apocalypse of the divorce, and it predicts divorce. And if you don't know what stonewalling is, it's just shutting down and reclusing during the midst of conversation. Antoine Lyons, good to see you, my brother, always, and welcome to this evening conversation. Cassandra says she's gonna look at you crazy. You talk to her that kind of way. All right, Onita Simpson, welcome to this evening's conversation. Good to see you. If you don't know, me and Onita will be talking in the morning, and that will be a great a continuation from this conversation as
What
well.
time?
So 10:30 in the morning, 10:30 Eastern Standard Time. Make sure that you're there. Okay. She says, if you're overly aggressive and loud, people stop listening because now they feel like they need to take the defensive stance physically and verbally. Absolutely right. She is spot on. Brother Eugene, I am tracking what you're saying here, my friend, but I am just going to put this up here and I'm not going to address it because we're going to talk about this here in a short minute, but you're absolutely correct. Let me see. I want to make sure Lisa agrees with your assessment of assertiveness. So does Cassandra. Hello, not here. Greatly appreciate you being a super supporter. Definitely appreciate that. And again, welcome to this evening's conversation. I think. Oh, let me see. Ms. Verlene McCoy says aggressive communication is meant to make you feel small and stupid. Some people have no respect for other people and what they are saying. Yeah, I don't disagree. Roland kind of described me earlier. Thanks, Roland. But that's who I used to be. I'm not that anymore. But absolutely. Absolutely. Once I got there, I'll be honest with you, in the Army, that's what I did. Go ahead, sir.
Now, I do think that aggressive communication has a place. See, I think some people think, oh, aggressive communication is all bad. Sometimes, just like with children, just like with soldiers, just like with any leader, has to at times assert themselves to show, hey, I got this. Sit down, shut up. You may not say it like that, but you got to say, shut up. Let me ride this horse. I say it in that fashion. Because I used to always tell my soldiers, when the bullets are flying, I don't need questions. Do what I said do, and we come back home. Because if you're saying why out on the battlefield, it doesn't work. So there are times when assertive communication, you can't get in your feelings because I said get your ass down. You got to get down. Because if you say, you get shot in the head, get down. And then we won't even have to go there. So there's a place for it. It just shouldn't be the person's overall communication tactic for everything.
Yeah, that shouldn't be a baseline for how you talk.
Yeah.
Right.
But can I be the young guy in the room for a second? So let's say, for instance,
Can you?
You didn't have to ask permission for that.
You are? Okay.
Oh, I know I am. Sometimes I try to act like I'm as old as y'all, but I'm not. Nah, I'm just only Roland do that. My big bro. Nah, but let's take, for instance, right? Let's bring it to culture for a second, because we know, growing up in the 80s and 90s, 70s and 80s for some of y'all, right? But
Thin ice.
no, I'm making a point. It's gonna clean this stuff up,
right?
Because there are things that we were taught because of what we were going to experience when we walked outside the house. There was not saying that there's not a struggle for the community today, but the struggle is different and it looks different today than what it looked like yesterday. So for us, there was a certain posture that our parents took with us. Like, my mama used to make a statement like, no, I'm going to knock you upside your head here so that the cops don't have to do it when you walk out of here, right? Because she didn't want you to go outside and get in trouble and end up on a mural on the wall. And we all know how that goes. But when the situation or when the circumstances around are different, does that same posture take the same effect that it did to you and I? Like, when I went to basic training, I knew when I got to my unit, we were probably going to deploy. Like that was in the back of my mind. 9/11 kicked off. I graduated 2 years later. Went to basic training. We already knew what time it was, right? I know y'all looking at me because I said graduated 2 years later. But these guys are going to Germany and Korea. So their mindset, if you tell them, sit down and shut up, or when I tell you to get down, that's what I mean. You know, but they're like, for what? That doesn't make sense. So if their mind is not set on going to war, even though that they're in the military, but that's not their mindset, does that same posture work? Does it have the same effect? I'm just asking the question.
I think it's depending. I think it's situational. It may not necessarily be a military situation, right? It could be in the in a community situation. Roland talks a lot about what it was like when he was growing up, and so in that particular scenario, let's just assume that there's a gang war, gang fight, whatever. I've never seen it, so I may be saying it wrong, and if I am, correct me, brother. But it may be like some gang violence going on outside, and your kids outside playing. I don't have time to go out there and softly speak to you. Y'all come on, y'all be quiet and y'all come on, just get low. And I don't have time for that. When I come outside, I'm yelling, I'm grabbing, and I'm snatching by the back of their britches and dragging them in the house. You know what I'm saying? The ones that can move, move. The ones that are small and their legs are too short, I got to grab them and pick them up on their. You see what I'm saying? So I think there is a case or a situation for an aggressive posture. I think the intent, like Uncle Junior said, the intent can't be to minimize the other person, to belittle the other person, to make them feel smaller than you. Now, I also caution on that note because sometimes people don't like correction and they automatically feel minimized. That doesn't make you aggressive. That just means that that's something that person has to work on. I think everybody in the space of communication has to assess themselves. And I hate to transition but I need to because we got at least 3 other points we got to cover. And I think for that being said, for us to fix it, we need to assess ourselves and not necessarily speak when you feel your core temperature rising. Take a few minutes, take a deep breath, walk around the house, drink some water, say, give me a minute, let me come back to this. Right? Find a way to cool down. Like for me, my thing was I needed to see it at least 3 times before I address it because I did not want to jump on it the first time I see it. So I think somebody mentioned patterns earlier. Once I observed that it's a pattern of behavior, which means that it is subconscious, then now I need to talk to it. But me taking the time for myself to assess myself, gather myself, and think about what it is I actually want to say and consider the other person before I said it, that was the thing that made me come off the aggressive posture. Even now to this day, I still have the ability to match emotions. And I tell people all the time, I say, be careful. You don't want me to wake up the dude I used to be. I try to stay here. I try to stay even keel as much as I possibly can. But once you take it here, I am not the person you really want to go there with. Keep it here, and I can stay here with you, and we can have civilized discussion. So sometimes, and I talk about this all the time. Sometimes it's okay to be passionate. Never confuse passion and aggression. They're 2 different things. There may be an inflection in my voice, but if I'm not yelling and cursing at you and calling you outside of your name and literally giving you the knife hand, that's not aggression. It might be a little passion because I have a sense of emotions behind the conversation that we're talking about. And men having emotions is not a bad thing.
I love that because you lead me into. I think somebody was saying in the chat, Miss Lisa Keys, talking about Simon Peter, and Simon was a hothead, and later on you see where he's told when you mature, strengthen your brothers, because right now you a hothead, you're young, you're cutting people's ears off, you cussing, you're acting a fool, and it's all about you. But later on, as you grow, it's just like with everybody. As you grow, if we're all out, you would expect the younger people to be the ones riffing and doing all that. You would expect. I wouldn't expect somebody almost 50 out there trying to start a fight. or if somebody says something, you gotta address everything someone says. But when you're older, you sit back and you can think about it. Like, okay, how is this going to end? You think about the end before you even think about the beginning.
Right.
And that's one of the things that when you mature, what can calm you down. Like, okay, I don't have to address everything. Oh, he called you this. I don't identify as that, so I'm good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Good point. Gentlemen, if you don't mind, I'm going to keep pressing and we're going to move into the next one. So the next one is passive. And when it comes down to passive, passive is a style in which individuals have developed a pattern of avoiding expressing their opinions or feelings, protecting their rights, and identifying and meeting their needs. As a result, passive individuals do not respond overtly to hurt or anger inducing situations. Instead, they allow grievances and annoyances to mount, usually unaware of the buildup. Passive communicators will often fail to assert themselves, allow others to deliberately or inadvertently infringe on their rights, fail to express their feelings, needs, or opinions, tend to speak softly or apologetically, exhibit poor eye contact, and slumped body posture. With that being said, what are the impacts of a passive communication pattern in relationships?
Something small turns into something big.
Say more.
You're holding on to things that you know you need to say. You know you need to say this, but you're not saying it. And it just keeps festering and keeps festering and keeps festering. And then something that normally wouldn't bother you blows you up. Y'all better quit that passive stuff, man. That's bad for your health.
Yeah, I'm a caveat with what he just said, because what tends to happen is you have a misconception of me because of your inability to express yourself completely to avoid controversy or to avoid drama. A lot of times you let things just blow over. So I may assume that you're okay with a certain behavior or with a certain joke that I tell or whatever the case may be. And now when someone be like, oh, you know that dude T? He cool people? Man, nah, he go too far sometimes, blah blah blah. But if I never knew, now you have a bad perception of who I am because you never gave me the opportunity to fix whatever I may be doing to you that's harming you or hurt you. So I think it's severed relationships a lot.
And you, instead of training people, you got to train people how to treat you. Because if you allow someone to, what people would call bullying now, but you allow them to demean you, to make you the butt of the jokes. Because I joke about everybody and everything. We could be at a funeral and I'm joking. I don't care. But if I see it's offensive, I don't care. I mean, you should be laughing. You should be enjoying stuff. And I'm going to enjoy myself at funerals and whatever. But when somebody's offended by something, you should have enough in you to know, like, hold up, I offended that person, so I got to go to that person. But if I'm the person, because I think men do a lot of this to try to keep the peace stuff. So you try to keep the peace. Okay, I ain't gonna say nothing. And then it just builds and builds and builds until next thing you know, he done snap and he got the woman in the chokehold or something like that. It's like, I do not advocate violence on women. Trust me, I don't. Keep your hands to yourself, fellas. Don't end up on the blotter report in the police station or anything like that. But I think it takes a calm demeanor to assess themselves so that they can actually make sure they address what's being said without being over the top with it.
So what I'm hearing you say is that aggressive people fight and passive people snap.
When it gets goes too far, yeah,
Okay.
they will.
That's what he said. That's what he said.
They made a TV show out of it. Snapped.
Yeah, they did. But were we not taught that though? Like, especially those of us who who our primary influence were our mothers, right? We learned a certain behavior when dealing with women, and so to avoid us from seeming like the big angry man in the house, or just seeming like we are the over masculine man, just so that we can liberate our women, we give in, or we shut down, or we don't challenge a lot of what she says or does or wants, and we just let a lot of stuff blow over. And sometimes we let a lot of stuff blow over because we know, like in my house, we say something like, we both know that we won't argue a lot of times because we both like to fight. I don't like to argue. Like, I'm one of them people that don't take me to the club because somebody do something stupid or say something. I'm not trying to argue. Grown men shouldn't argue. I think you should just either fight or shut up. So
I grew up in a house full of girls, a house full of women, and my grandmother told me, "Don't hit them girls." But
yeah,
if a female hits you, she's no longer a female; she's an opponent.
Absolutely.
That's what my grandmother told me. And because one time my sister, she hit me in the eye with a boot, and my grandmother didn't give me no sympathy. She said, "Your dumb ass should have ducked," and I had to get over that. But she said, if somebody hits you, they're an opponent. Don't care what the sex is.
We are not advocating violence against women.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris.
absolutely not.
But
Keep
however,
your hands to yourself. That's but.
Or
no,
to men.
I am a firm advocate in defending yourself. Firm.
Aggressive.
I do not care what your sex is. I don't. If I'm put in a position where I can't leave, then I don't have a choice. You understand what I'm saying? And I have to defend myself. I'm not going to ball my fist up and punch a woman. I'm not going to do that. That's stupid. And if I put my all behind it, she wouldn't live. I'm not going to open hand slap a woman because, again, if I put my all behind it, her head would spin around like the exorcist. But if I cannot leave and the only option that I have is to defend myself, then that's just what it is.
You know that? Never mind. This is a family show. My
Yeah,
bad.
yeah. We gotta, yeah. It's called a seatbelt method. First of all, that's all I'm saying. Listen, I agree. Like, we need to understand that passive forms of communication can be just as toxic or even more toxic than aggressive forms of communication. I don't think that one is compared to the other. I think they're both equally just bad. And there's an old saying, pressure bust pipes. Within the scope, and I've seen somebody put it up here. Here it is. Within the scope of passive communication, you're suppressing a lot of stuff. Therefore, you're experiencing a lot of anxiety and frustrations and things of that nature. A lot of anger is kept in, or a lot of disappointment, and all that other great stuff. And so these things have its toll, will take its toll on your body in a physical sense. This is where sickness sets in. This is where diseases sets in, because the emotions that you're feeling, you're not expressing them. The emotions were created to be expressed. I'm not talking feelings, I'm talking emotions. When they can't come out, they have to work within. So you will end up experiencing some sort of health issue, high blood pressure, cancer, tumor, whatever that looks like. It is a scientific fact that it will work in that capacity. So we have to learn to grow outside of passive ways of communication. So I'm thanking you for putting that up there, because you're absolutely right. So again, anxiety, depression, all of these things they literally stem from passive forms of communication. So I can't stress that enough. Um, let me see.
Can I
Yeah.
take a step back to go one step forward or two steps forward maybe?
Okay, sure.
I was looking at, as I was thinking and listening to everybody's points and conversation, I thought about the reason why. Why is the person passive? Is it a character trait, or is it a lack of confidence, or is it a lack of the ability? Does the person feel threatened in the relationship to where they're no longer comfortable feeling, to where they feel like they have to be passive? in order to maintain the relationship. I don't know. So I think part of this is trying to determine why the person is passive. And I think if you figure out if it's a character trait versus something else, I think you have to deal with it accordingly. You know, if someone has a passive demeanor, I think that we have to acknowledge that in the relationship, and then especially, you know, if we're talking to male or female, I'll just use the male or female just for this situation. You know, if I'm a male and I'm with someone and they're more passive, I may have to learn to maybe adjust, or both may have to come to an agreed upon, what am I trying to say? Because a person may be more passive, they may take things more sympathetically, or they may take things a lot more harder than a normal person, to where something may um trigger them a lot more easily or something like that, just because they have a more passive type demeanor about themselves. So I was just saying that, you know, I guess to kind of sum up this small little talking point is that depending on the reasons person for being passive will determine the outcome and how you deal with that person in the relationship, and as the communication is exchanged between the two people.
That's a good point. And I can definitely appreciate what you're saying. There is always a reason why a person's behavior becomes as it becomes, right? It's always a reason, whether it's personality, or their behavior traits or whatever. Um, Understanding that is important. But I also believe, in conjunction with understanding, everybody has the responsibility to grow and develop from where they are.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I can't use my personality trait and say, this is who I am, and I need you to appreciate and respect that. That's
Facts.
called manipulation. So when
Hmm.
we do that, what we're doing, we're skating a thin line. Everybody has the responsibility to grow. And so when we look at it from that perspective, learning and understand why I have this thing or why I do this thing, that's important. But I only learned the why so I can get to the how. How can I fix it? And
I'm glad I'm glad you said manipulation, because I wrote it down up here, but I wasn't able to kind of conform or put everything together to come up with a creative talking point. So I appreciate you throwing manipulation in there. You just co-signed what I had written down here. So I appreciate it.
I appreciate.
Teamwork.
There you go.
Teamwork. What a
Yeah. You
concept.
talked it out for me. I was like, man, I was like, how can I get it?
Like, see, this right here, what you just did and what Unc just did, that's a form of communication. You just saw a positive display of communication. When one person said something, the other person said something, and they both worked.
I like it.
I like it as well. Very good, sir. Very good. So again, shout out to all of our chat members, man. We greatly appreciate you. Just trust me, I am not ignoring anything you guys are saying. I am scrolling down. Welcome to this evening's conversation. Natasha Jones, always great to see you and welcome. Shaking Nations with Jesus Christ, always great to see you and welcome. Let me grab some of these talking points they got here. Let me see. Michelle made me, hold on. I think Cassandra was talking about something Roland said. She said she had to learn the hard way. I'm sorry, Roland. I just can't remember what you said, brother. But she said, to your point, she had to learn the hard way. Um, Michelle said, the build continues to create a new norm each time. Address it immediately. Absolutely. The build of that passive form of communication. It just becomes habitual, and then again, it just isn't good over time. Um, Cassandra agrees that passive people do snap. Um, let's say Lisa says, I'm sorry, I missed the first part. She says you were taught that as boys and girls. And then she also said, y'all don't adopt that opinion. She was saying, I think she was talking about us fighting and snapping and all that stuff. So don't adopt that opinion. Let me make sure. So Miss Verlene McCoy says some people have deep-seated anger towards the person and keep the peace. The others will let it go. Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, that just goes back. It just builds up. It's not healthy over time. Anita says, for me, it was to keep the peace as well as not knowing how to express myself properly. Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. And that's the thing.
See,
Go ahead, sir.
and here's where I am with that. I think passive communication is a form of lying because you're not being fully honest about what you feel. You're just saying stuff to get by, and your body knows you lying. So I don't know, man. Like I always said, I think passive communication is like a lie of omission
Mhm.
because you're not really letting everything out.
Thank you for Chris. Thank you for that, Chris. That was the other word I had on here. I was like, "Are you lying?"
Yeah, man,
Literally,
that's
that's what
really
I
what it
wrote
is,
down.
man. That's really what it is. Passive communication is a lie to make you feel good.
But sometimes I think if a person is up here, it's not my position to meet them up there. It's my position to say, okay, I'm gonna wait till you come down. If that person means something to me, and I'm trying to actually hear them out, wait till they blow up, do what you gonna do, and then we can actually communicate. Because I can't communicate up there. Because if I jump up there with you, then it's a fight.
But
Then
see,
We ain't
to
got no
me,
choice but to fight at
right.
right,
that
but see,
point.
that's not to me, that's not passive communication the way you're describing it. To me,
I
that's you
agree. Yeah.
recognizing the situation and saying, all right, I'm
Hmm.
gonna wait till you calm down so I can say something. That's different. That's different than not saying fully what's on your mind during the conversation while you are at a level head. I can understand where you're coming from because I've walked away from people that have been hollering and screaming at me, thinking that I'm just gonna sit there and try to talk to them while they all the way up there because I know it's not gonna end well. But
And
if
you're
we're sitting here like having a conversation like me and you right now, and you say something, and in my gut, I have a feeling, and I don't convey that feeling to you, and we're talking like this, that's to me, that's passive communication. And to me, that's me lying to myself because I'm not telling you what I really think. And I'm not even, and a lot of times it's an insult to the other person too, because you're not giving them enough credit to actually listen to you and say, okay, you might have a point. You understand what I'm saying? So to me, and I'm like, I'm learning, so I'm pulling everything out and I'm looking at it for what it is. You understand what I'm saying? I can understand you not wanting to argue with somebody that's in their feelings, but me and you having a conversation like this, and I say something to you and you don't say nothing, or you say something to me and I don't say nothing, and I know I feel a way.
so
That's
yeah,
just a lie of omission.
I agree wholeheartedly there. But I think when you either walk away or you are minimizing your conversation in silent for a while to let it dwindle, then you're communicating that okay, I'm with you here, and I'm not going there with you. I think it's a form of passive communication to where we can still communicate. And I'm gonna
If
say
you're
what I got
talking
to say.
passive, if you're talking passive as in passive, like, all right, I don't want things to escalate past this, so I'm a chill, then you're right. Because I can get that side of it too. Because so I guess there are different forms of passive communication.
Just
Right.
like
And I don't think
But
that's
but that's a
passive. I
deep.
think just
Right.
look.
Yeah.
That's yeah. That's not. That's called a
I think,
boundary. That's
yeah, I
not
think that's
passive.
what, yeah, what rolling.
Mhm.
You talked about that at the beginning of the show. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I think you
Like
just like, look, I ain't got time to deal with
right.
this. I ain't giving my energy to this. I don't think that's being passive.
Like for me,
And
I have a defibrillator. That's what I call it. I have a defibrillator. I'm not joking.
yeah.
Like seriously, I will participate in the conversation, but once I recognize that I am repeating myself over and over again because you can't process what I'm saying, I will stop. I will throw my hands up and say, "Hey, hold up! I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to repeat myself over and over again." That's my defibrillator. So you can continue to talk all you want to. I ain't got nothing to say about it because my conversation is going to be the same. So
Cause
generally at that point, that person will like, hold on, okay, maybe what you're saying is right. Maybe he is saying the same thing over and over again. So let me back up and consider what he is saying. Great.
absolutely. Cause you honestly got people who believe that the loudest person is the right person.
Yeah.
Right. So if I just continue to talk and
Yeah,
yell,
until they get their
that
teeth
means
knocked
I'm
out their
correct.
mouth.
Absolutely. And I get frustrated. If we can't have a conversation to where you can talk and I can talk, then we can't talk. And but I think even in the aspect of what Roland is talking about, like if the conversation goes somewhere and you up here yelling, that's a de-escalation tactic to just sit down and calm down because you have no choice but to come down. If you sitting there looking at me like this, and I'm angry, I have no choice but to come back down and meet you there because you're not going to meet me where I'm at. So that's why I say I don't see it as passive, because really you're bringing the conversation back to where it needs to be so that two people can speak on the same level.
Right. And that's why I talk about a defibrillator. It's not that I'm not going to talk anymore. It's just that I'm not going to continue to do this back and forth with the exact same thing. We can continue to talk once you realize that your brain is not a part of the conversation right now. Once your brain comes back and participate, then I'll talk. So yeah, you guys are spot on, man. And Chris, you say you're learning, brother, but you just I don't know if people caught it. You injected a perspective that it was smooth. I like the way you did that, because you made mention of the other side. It wasn't just the communication side. You said that you don't give the other person credit for listening when you were passive. See,
Yeah,
that
man.
was
A lot of
that
people are passive because they're afraid of what the other person might do. But
yeah, that
here's the thing, like from what I've learned from coming from being a passive communicator to being, I guess what you would call assertive, people respect you for being honest and straight up, especially when they know that you're not trying to hurt their feelings. It's just how you feel. It's just how you feel and what you and as far as men goes, it's more about what we think than how we feel. You see what I'm
absolutely.
saying? It's more about what we think. So it's not a shot. It's not to demean anybody. It's like, honestly, thinking about this is blah blah blah, and then we can have the conversation from there.
Absolutely.
Sometimes we just got to give people. Sometimes we have to give the other person that we talking to that we're afraid of their reaction. We got to give them some credit too, because your worst fears never happen, and the movie that you got played out in your head starring you might not even play out like that.
Absolutely. Listen, I'm greatly appreciating this, but time is not waiting on us. We got to keep pressing. But you guys are doing phenomenal. I'm not taking that away from you guys, and you guys are doing equally phenomenal in the chat. I want to make sure I'm addressing that. And if I don't get to your message, please don't charge it to me. Just understand that we have limited time, and I don't want to keep you guys all night. But I love what Miss Charlotte Jordan put here, because I think a lot of times submission and passivity is confused. So she is absolutely right. Some women were taught to be passive because it was considered to be submissive. They're not the same thing. They're not the exact same thing. Being able to articulate your emotions in a respectful and kind way is different than not saying anything at all. So I'm glad she said that. So thank you for saying that. Let me see. Lisa Key said, as I considered it, passive communication can be viewed as lying, yet there are other aspects to consider. Absolutely. Always other aspects to consider. Cannot leading with feelings help usher you out of passiveness? Um, I don't, and you guys can tell me if I'm wrong here. I don't believe it's the feelings that prevent me from expressing myself. I think when it comes down to passivity, it has more to do with me than it does with anybody else. Generally, there are people that I can go around and I can just be open, relaxed, and honest with, and I can express myself with those people. Those people probably have more to do with my upbringing. May probably present a warm, embracing atmosphere. But then there are new people that you encounter as well, and you don't necessarily know them. There are people that you work with, things of that nature. So when you look at it from that perspective, um, is it the fact that my feelings prevent me from being open and honest about how I feel? No, it's not my feelings. I would say it's more of a fear thing than it is a feeling thing. And the fear that prevents me from expressing myself comes from some event or comes from some teaching from my upbringing that prevents me from getting into that open, expressive way of existing. Any thoughts to go along with that, gentlemen? Okay, very well. Michelle, I hope I answered your question. If not, do me a favor and reframe it, and I'll be more than happy to touch it again. Passive communication limits your ability to truly be vulnerable, fully transparent, and intimate with your significant other. Absolutely. I love it. Anita says, I'm passive in certain situations so we can chill because I don't want it to become physical. And Anita said, you get her the wrong way, she's gonna start throwing them hands. I got you. I got you. Listen, I appreciate you guys. We got to keep pressing forward. So the answer to this one, what can I do to become less passive? I have to find a way to overcome the fear that is preventing me from expressing myself. Does that fear stem from my partner? Does that fear stem from a situation in my past that I have yet to resonate with? A good way to overcome passivity is to go to some form of therapy, some form of counseling, get in some type of group to where you have shared experiences to where you can work together and help one another, right? This is not a passivity transition to dominance. No, this is a passivity trying to move into being more expressive. Now, that being said, we got to move on and talk about passive aggressive. This is my favorite portion of the conversation because this is the thing that most people are totally unaware of. You can easily spot passivity, you can easily spot aggression, but passive aggressive is one of those things that if you don't know what it is, you really don't see it a lot. So, passive aggressive is a style in which individuals appear passive on the surface, but are really acting out anger in a subtle, indirect, and behind the scenes way. People who develop a pattern of passive aggressive communication usually feel powerless, stuck, and resentful. In other words, they feel incapable of dealing directly with the object of their resentment. Instead, they express their anger by subtly undermining the object, real or imagined. I'm going to stress that part again, real or imagined, of their resentment. Passive aggressive communicators will often mutter to themselves rather than confront the person or issue, have difficulty acknowledging their anger, use facial expressions that don't match how they feel, i.e., smiling when angry, use sarcasm, deny there is a problem, appear cooperative while purposely doing things to annoy and disrupt, and use subtle sabotage to get even. Gentlemen, what are the impacts of passive aggressive communication?
Go
Well,
ahead, Timothy.
I, I'm gonna keep it light because I know y'all gonna hit this. Y'all gonna knock this out the park. So I'm gonna use my experience, right, more than read information because I realize a lot of people use passive aggressive communication or even behaviors in order to manipulate situations as well as avoid head-on collisions of confrontation, right? Um, I think what some people do, they when I talk about manipulating situations, a lot of people they won't say stuff to you, but they'll leave things the way they are for you to fix it, to cause you to do what they wanted you to do, right? Or they'll they'll do something just enough to where you have to now act in the behavior in which they want you to do instead of just straight out coming and having this conversation with you. And that becomes extremely dangerous because once I feel manipulated, I am now acting with hostility. Whether it's in communication, whether it's physical, whether it's reactive. But once someone feels like they have been manipulated in a situation, there's nothing good that can come from that. Absolutely nothing.
I think when it comes to this passive aggressive thing, I can't stand it when people are passive aggressive and they think you don't know, because of the little snide comments and stuff. That'll start a fight with me fast. Like somebody could say, like, come on the show and be like, oh, well, he the coach, so he should just know. Like, you're not giving them a compliment. You being an a-hole and you trying to act like you not. When they do stuff like that, I think it something is triggered in them to where they didn't know how to express themselves previously to get their point across, and that person may have said something, and now it's like it's a you against me thing. So instead of us actually working together, we're working separately, and I may not even know it until you come at me with that passive aggressive mess, and you're just saying some things and showing your disdain for me in your behavior and your communication, and everybody else sees it also.
Bro, coach, you said it, man. It caused you to not want to be around people. You know what I'm saying? Like, no one likes that passive aggressive person. Like, no one wants to be that guy. No one wants to be around that person. I'm not gonna say nobody, but those people can at sometimes be very hard to be around. So a lot of times I think they don't really know it, and so they find themselves a lot of times
Yes, they
continuing
do.
on with the behavior. You know what I mean? I think some people are oblivious to it. I think there's another. I think where if they're oblivious to it, it may be, it may jump into another medically diagnosed condition or something like that. But if we just looking at some of the things the coach said, I'm thinking about the one that he said, and he used the word annoying. People don't like being around annoying people for the most part. So it can cause you to have breakdown in communication with a person. It can cause you to lose friendships. It can cause people to not want to be around you. And it can cause just miscommunication altogether. And like Chris said, it comes off as a lie. You know what I mean? Like, don't be like that with me. Like, just keep it real with me. Don't passive aggressive me at all. Like, I don't like that.
Right, and
Can I?
don't throw little don't do
Go
the
ahead,
little
coach.
subtle cheap shots thing at me. Don't do that. Don't do the subtle little insults where you not directly talking about me, but you're talking about me, because I'm like Roland. I'm going to address it.
Can I give you a trending example of passive aggression? Oh, he got on his little empowering perspective community shirt today. That is such a common thing in conversation today. Everything has to be little if it ain't yours.
You still got your little
Bro,
job
you
you working.
Right.
right? Yeah,
That is a trending
How your
form
little
of
YouTube
passive
channel
aggression.
going?
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
yeah.
It is a subtle expression of, we call it snarky, depending upon the circles that you travel in. It's like a snarky, subtle remark of like sarcasm to such a degree. You really don't like them or like that person or like what they're doing because it's not you, right? And so that's the posture that you take going forward. I think it's a little business, but that's true though. You know what I'm saying? You still doing your little business. You know how your little business
Facts.
coming along? Yeah, it's true. So it's like an underlining feeling, behavior of sarcasm or whatever, laced through some little phrase that they use, and you got to listen close because if you don't listen close, you'll miss it. And it has become such a thing that it's common language right now, right? It's another phrase we used to use years ago. I don't know if we still use it, to where you call a person, that person is nice, nasty. You know what I'm saying? Like they display a kind, nice behavior, whatever the case may be, but then there's a nasty undertone beneath what it is they're saying. So that's kind of like one of the things that we look at, or some of the things that we look at, so that we can clearly identify what passive aggressive behavior or communication looks like. I'm not totally really seriously. I can't mess with y'all today. So y'all got to check the chat. That's what I'm
Hey,
laughing at.
did Cassandra just say petty was a form of passive aggressive, bro?
Absolutely.
Putting that out there.
Is that what that was? What you just showed?
What's
Nah,
that now?
but you just
See what I'm saying? There they go. Hold on, man. Let me bring MJ to the
But I
conversation.
see what we're doing this Friday night.
Beacons of insecurity. Absolutely. Absolutely. Natasha said, sounds like the character traits of a narcissistic person. It absolutely can be. Absolutely can be. Let me see. Passive aggressive behavior is formed from a way to protect themselves to protect themselves or egocentric positions. Um, I can see what you're saying. I don't know if it'll be a form of protecting themselves or kind of like boosting themselves up by bringing you down to a certain degree. So yeah, you haven't heard of Nice Nasty? That's all right. I might be a little older than you. I probably gave my age away. I'm still not as old as Roland though. So with that
Yeah.
being said, how can how can we get to the point of adjusting my passive aggressive nature? What can I do differently if I am listening to this for the first time and I can relate to some of the things that you guys are saying? What can I do differently?
see. I halfway being petty on the low, right? Passive aggressively, halfway agree with Uncle Junior's little comment about not being aware.
I see what you
Nah,
did
but
there.
you see what I did. Nah, but for real, I think that I think they're aware. Like, I just to be honest, but I also think I do agree with him on the side that they need help. Because there's some people who are passive aggressive, just like with the passive, because they lack the confidence to just address things straight up. But some people just need some help. There are some people that just have to control narratives. So, but they need you to see them as if they're perfect as well. So they don't just come right out and say, I want to control everything, do what I say, because I'm a spoiled little brat. No. They manipulate the situation underhandedly to cause you to move a certain way. And those type of people need help. They need real professional help. That I don't know what else.
I think first they need self-reflection. They need to understand, hey, I got a problem, because I've always been, as y'all know me, and you know I can be real petty. I know I can be real petty, but I wasn't just. I be petty and fun now. I was nasty petty before, where like Coach said, nice nasty. That's how I was. I say the little snide comments because it put the light on me, like, oh, he being funny, he being cute. But no, I was being an a-hole. I was trying to put you down. And when I saw I could put you down and it lifted me up, I felt good about me. So there was something in me that I didn't feel good about. So I can hide that with all of the humor and all these other things by putting you down and stay hidden to my own little negative behaviors and everything. So I think you got to self-reflect and realize where you are and where you aren't, so that you can build yourself up to the point that you don't need to demean anybody to lift yourself up.
So another side to that as well, and I want to make sure I address this because we're talking about, because every version of these communication style is on a spectrum. I want to make sure I'm saying that. So you have the extremes and you have the mild. So the extremes are the ones that we're talking about mostly, but I also want to address the mild forms of passive aggression, because I can suggestively ask a question. And suggestively asking a question is also a version of passive aggression again. So in that case, again, it's mild, but instead of me just saying, hey, Chris, do you want to, whatever the rest of that is, right? Go hang out, whatever. But what the other side looks like is like, Chris, don't you want to go do this thing? So instead of, and it's like I'm suggesting it's in the form of a question, but it's really not his idea. I'm offering it as an idea in a form of a question to make him believe that it's his idea. When he hear it, he's like, you know what? That is a pretty good idea. So thank you for suggesting that. But why didn't I just ask the question? So the passive version of it was first as disguised as a question, but it really wasn't a question. It was a suggestion, because I think that's what he needs to do. So that is another version. Any version of aggression that is laced by passivity is passive aggression. So a disguised question that's not really a question is still passive aggression. So I want to make sure I say that, because this is the one, like I said, like we need to identify the spectrum, because even the mild version is dangerous in communicative practice, especially when you start talking relationships. Don't suggest things to your mate in the form of questions. Why don't you just ask them, do they want to? Or just make the suggestion. That's I think that's important to understand. So again, I appreciate that. And to adjust it, like Roland said, do some self-reflection. Be open to what people tell you, right? Because again, part of self-reflection is accepting the information that you don't see about yourself. Everybody has blind spots. So when someone tells me a thing, I need to be open. And again, I have three choices: to accept, reject, or neglect any new information that's given to me. I do not neglect it, because I consider myself to be a person patterned after growth. And so I don't neglect it. I have to either accept it. I'm sorry. Yeah, I have to accept it after I look at it and see that I do it, or if I look at it and see I don't do it, then I have the option to reject it. So those are the options that you have with any version of that. So again, I think that's important to go to discuss as well. Thank you, Michelle Ray. Greatly appreciate that. Again, we greatly appreciate our super supporters. By all means, if you want to be a super supporter, look up under the screen, and you'll see the $ down there. Click on that, and we appreciate all donations. Those donations will go back into the platform so that we can continue to feed you. Now, we started talking about assertive forms of communication as well, and I want to make sure I hit this before we get out of here. So, assertive is a style in which individuals clearly state their opinions and feelings and firmly advocate for their rights and needs without violating the rights of others. These individuals value themselves, their time, their emotional, spiritual, and physical needs, and are strong advocates for themselves while being very respectful of the rights of others. Assertive communicators state needs and wants clearly. They express feelings clearly, appropriately, and respectfully. They use I statements. They communicate respect for others. They listen well without interrupting. They feel in control of themselves. They have good eye contact. They speak in a calm and clear tone of voice, have a relaxed body posture. They feel connected to others. They feel competent and in control, not allow others to abuse or manipulate them, and they stand up for their rights. Gentlemen, what are the impacts of assertive communication on relationships?
I'll start with this. I think the impact is that it can be misunderstood. I think sometimes it can be easily misunderstood, as we talked about before, with aggression versus assertiveness. So, first of all, I think it can be misunderstood. And I'll just keep it short with that. I'm looking at the time, give everybody else an opportunity to hit this question.
I agree, but I will also say that it can be it could also be well when you set your standards and your boundaries, and you put it out there without fear, and it commands respect. People respect you when you're not afraid to say how you feel. But I 100% agree that it can be misunderstood as well.
I want to hear it. Go, Roland.
Well, I think you should be assertive in your communication because, one, when you speak, if you speak from the heart, you speak what you know to be true, and you assertive with it, not to put anybody else down. Maybe I'm not understanding it, but when you speak truth, it is what it is. And when people learn that when you speak, you not messing around with mincing words with this, that, and the other, it is what it is. I'm not trying to hurt your feelings, but I'm trying to tell you something for your good, for our good, so that it's no misunderstanding in what I'm saying. So you can't misconstrue it and say, well, I thought you, no, you didn't. I told you exactly what I meant. Maybe I'm not, addressing.
The problem with assertive communication is that most people aren't used to assertive communication, so it gets misconstrued with aggressive.
Bingo.
That's really what it is. I'm straight up. I don't have a choice but to be, because like I said, I can't tell you I love you and lie to you at the same time. My tone shouldn't matter if what I'm saying to you is coming from a place of love. Because if I'm talking to you and I'm talking to you like this, but I'm addressing something that you've done, it's because I see what you've done might be a detriment to you. You might need to take a look at this. You might need to fix this. A lot of people get offended because they can't. A lot of people get offended with straight up communication because too many people have been told things and it's been given to them with Kool-Aid instead of Buckley's. Sometimes being assertive, sometimes the medicine to a person who hasn't, assertive communication is medicine. And sometimes medicine doesn't taste good, but it still has the same effect either way. That's just me.
I'm agreeing 100%. Like we're in sync when it comes down to assertive communication, especially if you existed in a community that was not accustomed to what assertive communication looked like, and it was labeled on one extreme or the other. It was either aggressive or it was passive. We did not understood assertive communication. I don't care who you are. If you just went to school, assertive communication was never taught to you in school. Effective communication was taught to you, but assertive was not. You understood passive, you understood aggression. That was it. Aggressive people went to jail. They fought people. They got in trouble all the time. Passive people got bullied. That's pretty much what it is. So you understood those ends of the spectrum. You did not understood what assertive was. Therefore, when you see assertive, you are dependent to one of those ends, not even considering that it's not just one end or the other. It is a lineage that exists between one form of communication and another. Another piece I add, I believe that a lot of people, the situation would dictate which version of person you look like. Like Chris said, if the situation mandates, an assertive person can look aggressive. They're not aggressive. They're just, and I'm gonna use a phrase that I do not like. I want to make sure I say it. They're just speaking their truth. No, they're speaking the truth. That's just what it is. They're speaking the truth. An assertive person, when the chips are down and when the facts are laid on the table, they're speaking God to honest truth. The reason why you think it's aggressive is because you don't like it. That's all it is. So if we remove the idea I need to like or dislike a thing from the table, what are the facts? The facts are this. What does reality say? And when we look at that, that helps us to understand, like Chris said, maybe it doesn't feel good, but like medicine doesn't taste good, but we also know that medicine is designed to be good for you, depending upon what kind of medicine it is. So that's what I'm saying. So assertive communication is a thing. It is the best form of communication because it sets the condition for a healthy relationship. Assertive people establish and reinforce boundaries. You violate the boundary, assertive now looks aggressive. You respect the boundary, assertive looks very passive because it doesn't approach you with aggression. But you have to understand the spectrum is real. So we need to make sure that we're understanding that again. Any other thoughts, gentlemen? I'm sorry.
I want to just throw this out there because I think because you hit something when you said you either learn this or you learn this, and not just in school and in society. Period. You were taught there's some people that are aggressive, and then there's some people that are passive, or they might use different words. He's just angry or he's respectful, and those words are used
Don't leave out controlling.
interchangeably.
Don't leave out
Yeah,
controlling.
control, yeah, right. And
That's
we
the big
use
one.
these trigger words, yeah. And so what happens is my fear of coming across controlling or coming across angry or coming across aggressive will cause me to become passive. And I think so. I think there's a connection with those two, because there may be people who are passive because they were taught being assertive was a bad thing. I don't want you to look at me as selfish and I only care about me, so I'm just gonna let you always have your way. Yep.
Absolutely.
It's not good.
So I do have one other thing, gentlemen, and we're going to touch this real quick, and then we're going to get into the final thoughts. Listen, man, don't be that way. We're going to touch this real quick, and we're going to get into the final thoughts. Okay. I do have a question. Question came from one of our viewers, and I want to read it. I'm going to read some of it. So this is about communication. So the situation is two people, right? And this person is telling the story. So communication is hard because he listens to respond versus listening to understand. And responses are like he feels like she is attacking him or his kids, when in actuality, she is more calm, cool, and collective, telling him what she observes so that they can come to some kind of agreement or compromise to solve the issue. In your and last but not least, he also starts yelling and cursing. So this person is asking for your advice. What advice would you give this person?
It sounds like a blended family that's not necessarily a family, a blended living condition. And they don't talk the same, but they want the other person to talk like them to them. So first and foremost, they need a mediator, someone with sound mind to come in and actually sit between the two and decipher what's being articulated. So when one is speaking, the other person can't speak, and vice versa. And also, what was said in there, it's just thrown out there, and it's a bunch of pieces because you brought kids, you brought children in here, and you brought
Notice they said his kids and not our kids.
right. So it's a separate. That's why I said a blended living condition.
Yeah.
And I think people try to put things together and make it work like gumbo works instead of making it work like a salad works. Because with gumbo, everything blends together and it all tastes like gumbo. With the salad, you can taste the onions, the carrots, and everything. It works well being itself. And these people don't work well being themselves. So they need somebody to come in and work with them. So if they wanted to work, I would say seek some assistance from a professional.
I need some context. I really
That's
do.
all. That's all I got.
You got it.
Yeah, that's all. That's all I got.
Well, if I'm basing it on that, and this is me on the outside looking in, because like I said, and I caught that observation when they said his kids and not our kids. This is where, and not to flip it, but this is where a lot of mothers with kids fail too. Because sometimes the father can see something and say, hey, you need to straighten this out with this kid. And it comes off as an attack to their parenting style or that they're not a good parent. So this dude might be in his ego. You understand what I'm saying? And not willing to listen to constructive communication on how to make a union work. Because just like when women say it's a package deal, if this woman is taking in him and his kids, that's a package deal too. And she got to have some sort of say about how this union work, because it's not about you no more when y'all two get together. It's about the kids. And y'all got to figure out how to work cohesively for these kids. So if your partner who was gracious enough to bring you into their world and all of the components that you come with, you might have to give her a little bit of leeway and listen to what she got to say, because she might be making some sense and it may help your union get better. So he might need to get out of his ego.
Yeah,
I agree with what everybody said, but I also going to look at it on the flip side as well. Or the flip side of Chris's perspective, I think sometimes we have to be careful, whether it's the male or the female, whoever's the one coming into the relationship, into the family that's already established, because he's bringing kids into the situation. So she's actually entering into his established family format already, right? But I think it's important that he understands, or the other person understands, by your expressed actions and words, that you are willing to take care of these children and coexist as parents for these children. Because I do agree that he can be in his ego, but I will also agree that if a man or a woman feels as if you don't respect or you don't care for their kids because they're not yours, that's gonna be how they perceive everything you say from then on. So and hold on, because if you don't respect, if I feel like your actions show me you don't respect my children when you speak on my children, I'm going to view everything you say about them from a viewpoint of you don't like them. You get what I'm saying? Whether I'm right or wrong, but it's so in the relationship, we have to make sure whether I'm the one coming in without kids or she is, we have to make sure that the other party understands how you respect, because your children is what was dear to your heart before you met the other person. So I can't bring you into my home and you don't like my kids, because I'm responsible for them.
That's true. And I understand where you're coming from. But if I'm looking at this and what coach said, if I'm looking at it at base level, it's not about the dynamic that you talked about, Tawame. I lived it. So I understand exactly where you're coming from. The dude my mom married was trash. But it seems to me like she brought him and his children into her world, and now they're a union, and she sees things that those kids aren't doing or are doing that could be a detriment to everything, and she's saying something to him and he's cursing her out and attacking her. Like, no, like that's not how that's supposed to work. You understand what I'm saying? Even the step parent is supposed to have some sort of like, hey, I see your child doing this and he need to cut it out. I see your daughter doing this and she need to cut it out. It might not be, I think your child is trash, or I can't stand your kids and I can't wait till they get out of my house like I had to live through. It might not be that. It might be, hey, your child is going down this road and it might be a good idea for you to sit down and talk to him. You understand? It could be something like that.
Yeah.
That's why I said I needed more context, because it could be a plethora of things, and I'm looking at it from she's trying to make the union work and he's in his ego and not listening to nobody because he has to be the man.
Yeah, I think for the sake of conversation, to avoid all assumptions, I think the clear depiction based upon what is written is that they're struggling in their communication efforts. That's clear and obvious. He is struggling with his ability to hear and process information and respond to such a degree that he is not tearing anyone down. The yelling and the cursing is obvious that he is displaying some aggressive posture based upon what he's hearing. We don't know why. I don't know why. I don't want to speculate nor assume. I just think it's important that they get to the point to they find a way to communicate in such a way that they respect one another. So my advice would be they need to do a lot of self-reflection. If I am yelling and cursing, what is it that I'm feeling that's moving me to yell and curse at anybody, period? Not just, my significant other, but just anybody. What is it about the conversation? What is it about their way of communication that moves me to yell and curse at them? And then once I identify that thing, I need to understand why it affects me that way. Maybe it's some things I need to go back and resonate with myself, so that I can move to the point of being okay to have those conversations. If it's a form of conversation that provokes him, that is also something that needs to be addressed openly and honestly to move in the direction of assertiveness. So I think for me, I think that's the important piece. That's my advice to those two young individuals. Get to the point to respecting one another. I think respect is paramount when it comes down to two people. Why? Because we're teaching those children how to communicate. They're watching us, they're observing us, and they're adopting our communication style. That's going to be how they communicate at school. That's going to be how they're going to communicate with their significant other. And then moving forward, that's how they're going to communicate in the workspace until they learn differently and otherwise. Um, as always, this is a bittersweet moment for me because this signifies the end. But again, I want to make sure that I address everybody and thank you. How much I greatly appreciate your comments, your presence, because you could have been anywhere else on us Friday night, but you're here with us. So again, we appreciate you. Greatly appreciate our super supporters. And again, if you want to be a super supporter, by all means, go ahead and participate. We appreciate all anything that you give. And our super supporters will be blessed with this very nice, empowering perspective polo shirt. And we got some more colors as well. So I'm just modeling it for tonight. So that being said, not you, Chris. That being said, that being
I was
said,
about to say I'm up to bat.
no, not you. That being said, we're going to start off with Brother Gaddy as he give us our final thoughts on tonight's conversation.
Right. I almost said amen. It sounded like you was introducing me as the speaker of the hour. No.
The Reverend Deacon Doctor.
All right. But I think to get to the nitty gritty, the bottom line of what I believe the goal of tonight is, at least in my heart, would be it's okay and it's right for you to set your boundaries and your guidelines of how, or not just of how you communicate, but also how you receive communication, right? Which means I'm not going to respond to people yelling and screaming like we said today, right? But on the flip side as well, you have to respect that the other person that you're talking to also has boundaries. Because I think sometimes it can get one-sided, all because you're being assertive don't mean that now you can become disrespectful to the other person's boundaries. And I think that is a good recipe, at least starting out, for effective communication between two people. A saying that I heard a lot over the last 5 years from somebody me and Roland both know. They used to say all the time, no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. So if you acknowledge, at least in the way you speak to me, my boundaries or my standards, now I care about what you're saying. But when you come across as if you're the only person important in this conversation, I don't care about anything else you're saying. I'm actually blocking you out. So we have to make sure we share and respect, but don't be afraid to demand your respect as well.
Unmute.
Let me unmute my mic. Last week and this week, communication tips that you must apply to unlock your future. We talked a lot tonight about body position, different things like that. So I got three communication tips. My first tip is to practice non-aggressive body language and how it may be received by the other person. You have to really look at that. How is your body language? What message is your body language portraying to the person, to the receiver, to the person on the other end of the conversation, or to the other people on the end of the conversation, if you're talking to a group of people or something. If you're having a conversation and that conversation goes left, you have to put the conversation and or the solution in as the priority. You have to get to a point to where a solution is being talked about and not just everybody's feelings and everybody's hurts. Not saying that they are not important, but at some point we have to move the conversation to a solution-based conversation. Also, practice communication. Communication is a skill that can be learned, but you're going to have to practice it. So one way to practice communication just overall and get better at it is, after you have conversations, going back, reflect on it, look at both parties, look at what was said, see how you can get better at it, and then start applying those techniques to the next conversation or your conversations going forward.
Final thoughts. We've talked a lot about communication the last couple of weeks, but I'm a lowest common denominator kind of dude. All communication should be rooted in honesty. Be honest. Just be real. If you cannot be honest with the person that you're talking to all the way, then you don't need to be conversing with them, because there's no need for you to have to hold in certain things just because you're afraid of offending somebody, because you're afraid that they're afraid of what you see as the truth, especially if they asked you. So just be honest. Be honest and understand that being honest is what's good for the entire situation and not just you. You don't have to be hurtful. You don't have to be mean, but you have to be honest. So just start there. Just be honest. And I think I'll just leave it at that.
Listen first. In communication, always be listening. Listen with your audible ear, and listen with your heart, and listen to, you got to read their body language also, and also your own. And listen not to necessarily just to hear, just to speak, but listen so that you can actually be able to convey anything that's being said if you have to relay something. learn what bothers you and learn why. Because if you learn what bothers you, you will be able to articulate it. And when you can articulate it, you're less frustrated. And the less frustrated you are, the more apt you are to actually hold a conversation that challenges you to go above where you actually are. And never lose your voice. Because when you feel that you're losing your voice, you're losing a part of you. You tend to lash out, you tend to overtalk, you tend to go above and beyond, and that's when you're passive aggressive and all these other things. So never lose your voice. Always be able to articulate yourself where the other person can hear you without you having to elevate your tone and all this other things, especially if it doesn't call for it. And always speak truth and honesty, as Chris just said, because when you speak truth and honesty, a person already knows if it's a norm for you, whatever you say is golden. So they can take it to the bank, because if you said it and you're known for speaking truth and being an honest person, then they know you're not trying to hurt them. So if you say something that does hurt them, it's only hurting their feelings because they need to change.
It's not often that I come to the big stage at the end of the show. But listen, I think my communication, or what I'm going to share in the facet of communication, is going to sound a little different. I want to communicate a great deal of appreciation to these gentlemen. I mean, just look at them as they hang out on the side of it. I'm gonna keep them over there for a second. I appreciate those men. Those men are phenomenal, just phenomenal. They add so much value to the show. So I want to make sure I address that right now in front of everybody. I also want to express my appreciation to everybody who actually join us every Friday night, who adds so much value to the chat. I mean, you guys are amazing. And the last but not least, I want to just thank you guys. I know we went a little long tonight, but I think everybody can agree that this was one of those conversations that was necessary. And again, I just want to make sure that I address my appreciation to each and every one of you. With that being said, that was my final thought. I will be back tomorrow morning with Miss Onita Simpson, and we're going to talk about the 5 keys to increase social competence, which will help you to create and develop great relationships. With that being said, I want each and every one of you to have a great rest of your evening, and then just have a phenomenal weekend. So until next Friday at 8 p.m. here, we will see you then.